Imagine you're 15 years old, you wake up, you get dressed, grab your school bag, and just head out the front door.
Right, just a totally normal Tuesday morning.
Exactly. You're planning to meet your best friend who lives, maybe 3 streets over. But when you get to the end of your block, the street is just, well, it's gone.
Just completely gone.
Yeah. In its place, there's this line of soldiers unspooling barbed wire across the pavement. They're literally tearing up the cobblestones and blocking the whole intersection.
Wow.
And you're standing on one side and your friend's house is on the other. In that single, just bewildered moment, you don't even realize it yet, but the trajectory of your entire life has been severed.
It's permanently altered, yeah.
Right. Your future, your identity, it's all severed from the world you knew yesterday. So what do you do when your reality is dictated by a barrier erected overnight by people you will, frankly, never even meet?
Well, you adapt, or, you fracture. And that is the really visceral, unsparing reality that Nina Willner captures in this book, The Boys in the Light.
Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Our mission today is to, completely strip away the grand, high-level political theater that usually dominates stories about the Cold War.
Right, we're putting away the maps and the treaties for this one.
Exactly. We're looking at a divided Germany, but strictly through the microcosm of these young boys. We're going to explore these invisible, agonizingly quiet moments of survival.
And everyday courage, really.
Yes, everyday courage. And we want to show you why the psychological mechanisms these boys use to survive are actually urgently relevant to your own life today.
Because the overarching triumph of this source material is how it fundamentally redefines historical observation.
How so? Like, what makes it so different from a standard history textbook?
Well, when you remove the statesman from the narrative, when you deliberately ignore, the big conferences at Yalta or Potsdam, you're left with the raw collateral damage.
The people on the ground.
Exactly. You're silencing the speeches of presidents, and you're just looking at the micro-level reality. It's about a boy having to calculate the political ramifications of a single sentence spoken in a schoolyard.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second. If we completely ignore the big geopolitical players, don't we lose the entire reason the wall was built in the first place?
That's a common concern, yeah.
I mean, if we're just looking at boys navigating a street, doesn't that sort of risk stripping away the historical context that makes the Cold War such a pivotal era?
It's a fair question. But macroscopic history, looking at it from the top down, often creates this dangerous illusion of detachment.
Oh, interesting. Like we're too far away to feel it.
Right. It trains us to view historical events as, unstoppable weather patterns, a cold front of communism moving in here, a high-pressure system of capitalism building over there.
So it just feels inevitable. Like it's safe to study because it's just abstract data.
Exactly.
Right.
But by placing the reader entirely inside the microcosm, alongside characters whose fears are incredibly localized, the massive ideological stakes are actually felt way more acutely.
That makes a lot of sense. So looking at standard history is almost like looking at a city via satellite imagery, right? You see the walls and the borders.
Yeah, so you see the shapes.
But this book, it's more like Google Street View. You are literally on the ground, feeling the pavement, looking at the people face to face.
That is a perfect analogy. You understand the true weight of a surveillance state, not by reading some dry government mandate on intelligence gathering.
Right.
You understand it by watching a child hesitate at the dinner table, wondering if he can tell his parents a joke he heard about a government official.
Wow, yeah. Because the mandate is just a piece of paper. But that child hesitation, that is the mandate functioning in real time.
That is the mechanism itself.
Yeah.
Willner proves that these sweeping monolithic systems are best understood by observing how they warp minute, everyday choices.
So let's actually look at the environments these boys are operating in. The source emphasizes that we are looking at two sides of the exact same coin here.
They share the same country, the same deep cultural roots.
Right, the same language, the same fairy tales, and yet their daily realities could not be more alien to one another. It's like taking two seeds from the exact same plant.
Oh, I like where this is going.
You take these two identical seeds, right? You put one in a tightly controlled, sealed greenhouse, and you throw the other one out into the wild forest.
They're the same organism, but their survival strategies will become entirely different.
Exactly. So let's talk about those two environments. The book is careful not to just do a simple good versus evil trope, right?
Right. It maintains a really strict nuance. We have to analyze the specific pressures without rendering a simple political verdict.
Because it's about the psychological impact. So on the restricted side, East Germany, you have a reality defined by pervasive, almost suffocating surveillance.
State control was absolute. But to really understand the mechanics of that, we have to move away from the cliché image of a spy in a trench coat.
Yeah, no guys listening through the walls with a glass.
Exactly. Surveillance in this context was atmospheric. It was in the schools. Teachers would ask young students what time the clock on the television news showed the night before.
Wait, really? Why would they ask about a clock?
Because the West German news broadcast showed a clock with a very specific face, and the East German news had a totally different one.
Oh my gosh. So if a 6-year-old innocently describes the West German clock,
The state suddenly knows that the parents are committing a crime by watching foreign media in their own living room. That is the environment these boys are growing up in.
that is terrifying. It's so insidious.
And consider the ripple effect of that on a developing brain. Atmospheric surveillance breeds a highly specific type of psychological adaptation.
I mean, paranoia has to just become the baseline, right?
Paranoia is the baseline, yeah. But the secondary effect is hypersensitivity. You learn to read the microscopic shifts in a room.
You're constantly categorizing people, like who's a true friend, who's an informant, who is just standing there passively.
Exactly. You develop this incredibly rich, fiercely guarded internal life simply because your external life is public property.
It's basically like living inside a panopticon, where you never know if the guard in the center tower is looking directly at you.
Right, so you have to just assume you are always being watched.
And so you start policing yourself.
And self-policing is the ultimate goal of state control. It's much cheaper and way more efficient than hiring a million spies.
That makes total sense. But let's cross the border and look at the side of relative freedom. Because the book doesn't paint West Germany as a perfect utopia either.
Not at all. Freedom does not automatically equate to peace. The text points out that this side carries its own intense, crushing uncertainty.
Right. I think it's easy to assume the restricted side was just purely miserable and the free side was an absolute paradise. How does the book balance that?
Well, think about the psychological whiplash. In the East, the path is dictated. The state decides your education, your career, your housing.
It's oppressive,
Yeah.
but it's a known quantity. You know exactly what's coming.
Yes. But in the West, particularly during that rapid economic boom, the rules are entirely unwritten.
So when you aren't being told exactly who to be, you are suddenly faced with this paralyzing burden of infinite choice.
Exactly. If the restricted side is a panopticon, the free side is a sprawling, unmapped maze.
There are no walls stopping you from running in any direction, sure, but there's also no safety net if you just run straight off a cliff.
The pressure to succeed, to capitalize on this freedom, to define yourself in a society that is rapidly modernizing, that is an immense weight for a young boy.
It's the anxiety of abundance versus the anxiety of deprivation. That is such a fascinating human contradiction.
And Willner captures it beautifully. She refuses to strip the boys on the restricted side of their joy, their deep loyalties, or their quiet moments of rebellion.
Right, they still had real human lives.
And she also refuses to pretend the boys on the free side aren't wrestling with profound isolation or the fear of failure.
She treats them all as deeply complicated human beings, not just political mascots for capitalism or communism.
Which brings us to how she manages to capture that delicate, authentic nuance. We have to look at the lens she's looking through.
Yeah, the author Nina Willner. The source notes highlight that she brings a professional background in intelligence and international affairs to her writing.
Which fundamentally alters the DNA of the narrative.
I totally agree. I mean, reading a history book by someone with genuine field experience, it's kind of like having a master chef cook for you.
Right, instead of just someone following a recipe card.
Exactly. They just instinctively know how to balance the ingredients.
Yeah.
But I will say, when I hear intelligence background, I instantly think of cold clinical facts.
Or an action-packed spy thriller.
Right, sterile reports or James Bond.
Yeah.
Yet the source calls this book quiet and emotional. How does an intelligence background translate into such deep, accessible human empathy?
It's a great question, because a traditional historian approaches an era through the archives. They're looking for documented facts, written correspondences, official memos.
Basically conducting an autopsy on the past.
Yes. But Willner, with her intelligence background, is operating more like a behavioral ecologist studying a living ecosystem.
An intelligence officer isn't looking for a document. They're looking for a baseline.
Exactly. Real intelligence work, the unglamorous reality of it, is intensely psychological. It is the practice of acute patient observation.
It's pattern recognition, right?
Entirely. They are trained to understand the deep, hidden motivations behind human behavior. They walk into a room and immediately assess the power dynamics.
Like who's making eye contact, who is shrinking into the corner, what are the subtle tells that someone is hiding something?
So when Wilner looks at the historical accounts of these boys, she isn't just reading what they said, she's reading what they couldn't say.
She recognizes the invisible weights that a traditional historian might completely miss.
She understands the life and death stakes of keeping a secret in a society where secrets are literally currency.
And she translates that operational tradecraft into genuine empathy. She knows how to spot the subtle ways people communicate when they aren't free to speak out loud.
A change in posture, a coded phrase, a deliberate silence. Her background doesn't make her cold, it makes her hyper-empathetic to the survival mechanisms of the human mind.
She sees the defense mechanisms for exactly what they are. And that transition brings us directly to the core themes she extracts from these lives.
The four heavy, overlapping pillars that structure the entire narrative.
Right. The source outlines them as freedom versus control, identity, courage, and division. Let's really unpack these.
Let's begin with freedom versus control. The narrative forces a profound reevaluation of what freedom actually is.
Because we have this tendency to define freedom strictly in the negative, right? Like as just the absence of physical restraint.
The logic goes, if you're not in a prison cell and you can physically cross a border, you are free.
But Willner pushes past that. She asks us to look at the internal landscape.
Yes. If your mind is constantly policing itself to conform to the expectations of your peers, are you truly free?
Or if you're modifying your behavior because you fear the social or economic consequences of stepping out of line,
Right.
even in a quote-unquote free country.
Exactly. The boys in the East were physically controlled by the state apparatus, but the boys in the West were often controlled by the fierce, unspoken demands of their society.
Control isn't always a soldier with a rifle. Sometimes control is just the overwhelming pressure to adopt a specific definition of success.
And navigating that control directly impacts the second pillar, which is identity. The struggle of defining oneself when the environment actively tries to define you.
Let's look at how this played out mechanically for a boy in the East. You wake up and you put on the blue shirt of the state-run youth organization.
The Free German Youth.
Right. You go to school, you recite the party slogans perfectly, you smile, you nod, you play the role of the loyal young citizen.
That is your public face.
But then you go home. You close the door. You sit in your kitchen and tune your radio to a faint, crackling frequency broadcasting from the West.
Listening to rock and roll music that the state has deemed subversive, that is your private face.
Sociologists call this a niche society, right? Where the true self only exists in these tiny, private niches hidden away from the public eye.
Yes, but the psychological toll of doing that every single day must be just devastating.
You are constantly fracturing yourself.
Hmm.
If you're a teenager, your brain is still developing. How do you even figure out which parts of your identity are actually yours?
And which parts are just the defense mechanisms you've built to survive the day? That is the central philosophical tension for these boys.
The line between the mask and the face becomes incredibly blurry.
And if you play the role of the compliant citizen long enough, does that compliance seep into your actual personality?
That's terrifying. Defending your authentic self against that erosion requires the third pillar, which is courage.
But as the source explicitly notes, this is a very specific type of courage.
Right. It's not the loud cinematic courage. Nobody is charging a machine gun nest in this book. Nobody is giving a sweeping speech on a barricade.
It is the quiet, agonizing, everyday courage of making difficult choices in the dark.
I like to think of it like holding your breath underwater. It's not flashy, no one can even hear you doing it, but it requires immense strength, and it's a matter of survival.
Or think about the mechanics of living under heavy surveillance. It's not a battlefield, it's a room lined entirely with invisible motion sensors.
Oh, that is the perfect way to visualize it. A room full of motion sensors.
Right. Courage isn't running and shouting in that room.
No, courage is the agonizing, hyper-aware calculus of every single step you take. You have to breathe shallowly, you have to move your arm an inch at a time.
It requires immense localized strength and intense focus. And every step you take without triggering the alarm is a monumental act of defiance.
Even though to an outside observer, it just looks like you're standing perfectly still.
Exactly. And that quiet courage was practiced daily. It was the courage to lend a banned book to a friend, knowing the risk.
Or the courage to maintain an unauthorized correspondence. Or refusing to inform on a classmate, even when the secret police threatened your own future.
These are micro-rebellions. They're totally invisible to the history books, but they are the absolute bedrock of human dignity.
Which brings us to the final pillar, division. The state imposes control, which challenges identity, which requires courage. But the control also creates division.
And we aren't just talking about the physical wall of concrete and barbed wire.
No, we're talking about the internal division within a person's own mind, splitting them into that public and private self.
The physical borders are almost secondary to the psychological ones. A physical wall, as we know, can be dismantled in a matter of days.
Right, the concrete is hauled away, the streets are eventually reconnected.
But the psychological walls, the instinct to hide your true thoughts, the deep-seated distrust of authority, the trauma of fracturing your identity, those remain.
They stay intact long after the geopolitical map changes. The history literally outlives the geography.
Which transitions us perfectly into how we, as readers, are supposed to digest this incredibly heavy, nuanced reality.
Yeah, the reading experience itself. The
Yeah.
source material spends time focusing on this. It makes a really strong point that this is not a book you just skim for facts.
It must be experienced. The mechanics of empathy demand time. You cannot speed run understanding.
The narrative is deliberately paced to build slowly,
Right.
right? Like a conversation getting more and more personal.
Exactly. It pulls the reader in with gentle observations before hitting them with the harsh reality of the boy's circumstances.
It forces you to pause, to sit with the discomfort of an impossible choice, and to rethink your assumptions.
And we live in an era of 15-second videos and algorithmic feeds. Everything is designed to give us the absolute shortest, most frictionless path to a dopamine hit.
Oh, totally. We consume history as bullet points now, but
Yeah.
reading this book is a fundamentally different cognitive exercise.
It requires a cognitive load that modern media actively tries to eliminate.
When you're forced to stop reading and just sit with a heavy, devastating sentence, when you have to put the book down because a moment feels too real.
You are practicing a form of deliberate processing. You are sharing, even for just a fraction of a second, the emotional weight of those boys' reality.
It's the difference between skimming a typical book, which is like looking at a photograph of a massive fire on your phone and just scrolling past it,
Right.
versus reading this book, which is like actually standing close enough to a real fire to feel the heat radiating onto your face.
You can't swipe away the heat. You are present in the environment.
So in our modern era, is this kind of slow media, this deliberate, challenging engagement with history a tough sell? Or is it exactly the antidote we need to our shortened attention spans?
It is essential. It is absolutely the antidote. We are currently suffering from a massive overload of information, but a severe deficit of understanding.
Yeah, we know a lot of facts, but we don't feel them.
When we rush through history, we retreat to the safe distance of that satellite view you mentioned earlier. We fall back on simple, binary labels.
Good guys and bad guys, winners and losers.
But Willner's technique of pacing the narrative to force reflection is actively building a bridge between our safe, fast-paced modern life and the high-stakes existence of her subjects.
And that bridge actually leads us directly into the modern world, which is a huge part of this deep dive.
The source makes a very bold assertion here. It insists that this narrative is not just a dusty historical account.
It argues the ideas are timeless, and that the history is actively shaping us right now, because we live in a world struggling with the exact same questions of freedom and identity.
We often treat history as the operating system running in the background. We don't see the code, so we assume it isn't affecting the apps we use every day.
Right, history isn't just the rearview mirror, it's the engine driving the car we are currently sitting in.
If we accept that the human hardware hasn't changed since the Cold War, we have to look at how these historical mechanisms manifest today.
Okay, let's explore that, because obviously the setting has changed. I mean, I don't have to show my papers to a guard with a rifle to cross into a different neighborhood today.
No, you don't.
We don't have a literal wall splitting our cities in two. So how exactly do the psychological and emotional borders that Willner explores manifest for us today?
Where is the surveillance state now? Well, the architecture of the panopticon has simply been digitized.
Oh, wow.
Today, the divisions aren't necessarily physical walls built by foreign superpowers. They are algorithmic echo chambers.
They're ideological silos designed to curate and control the information you see.
shaping your reality just as effectively as state-run media did during the Cold War.
So instead of a government intelligence agency monitoring what time the clock on my television shows, it's a corporate algorithm.
Tracking your clicks, your location, your purchases.
And the exact amount of time I spend hovering over a specific video on my feed.
Exactly. And consider the psychological effect of that modern surveillance. When you know you are being watched, categorized, and targeted by algorithms.
When you know your social media presence is being constantly evaluated by your peers or prospective employers.
How does that alter your behavior? Does it breed a new kind of self-policing?
Oh, absolutely it does. It's the public face and the private face all over again. We curate our online identities to conform to the expectations of our specific ideological tribe.
We hesitate before posting an authentic thought because we have to calculate the social ramifications.
The potential for cancellation or backlash. It's the exact same mechanism of self-censorship, just operating under a totally different flag.
And we are still wrestling with the burden of choice. We're navigating a society that offers unprecedented, overwhelming freedom to be anyone.
While simultaneously applying immense pressure to succeed and conform. The borders are digital and the walls are psychological, but they are incredibly effective at dividing us.
The question of who are you when your environment actively tries to define you is just as urgent today.
For someone doom scrolling on their phone at 2 a.m., it's the exact same internal battle as it was for a boy walking the streets of a divided Berlin in 1965.
The stakes look different on the surface, but the internal mechanism, the struggle for identity, the need for quiet courage, is identical.
That is the ultimate value of The Boys in the Light. It uses the extreme, high-contrast environment of the Cold War to illuminate the everyday struggles of the human condition.
It reminds us that pushing back against invisible systems of control and fighting to maintain an authentic self is a constant, ongoing endeavor.
Which brings it all together so beautifully. As the source summarizes, at its core, it's a story about light, about finding it, holding on to it, and sometimes risking everything for it.
It's not just about the darkness of the division.
No, it's about the resilience required to keep the internal light burning when the wind is actively trying to blow it out.
It is a profound, transformative piece of work that equips the reader with a totally new lens for viewing both history and their own reality.
But based on everything we've unpacked today, I strongly recommend that you pick up a copy of The Boys in the Light by Nina Willner.
And remember the advice? Experience it slowly.
Yes, sit with the heat of the fire. We've spent this deep dive exploring the micro-level reality of history. We talked about how the sweep of global politics translates into terrifying, quiet moments.
Navigating a room full of invisible motion sensors.
And the exhausting work of maintaining a private self in a world that demands total public compliance. But tonight, when you put your phone down,
When the screens go dark.
when the room finally goes quiet, I want you to ask yourself a question. What are the invisible borders you are refusing to cross in your own life right now?
What digital or societal systems are currently shaping your identity?
Policing your thoughts and curating your reality without you even realizing it. And more importantly, amidst all of that noise, where are you finding your light?
A truly vital question.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.